Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Summer Kama. Summer Kama's been an often debated unit, basically ever since she came out on JP. She is going to be the SSR on our second banner, or second female banner there, in Summer 6 coming up. So, again, with regards to her availability, you could rest assured that if you can't get her right here during Summer 6, you might be able to get her next year during her rerun, but keep in mind that from there on out, it's going to become a little bit more up in the air as to when she'll show up. That's both of her sort of main two chances that you'll have to roll her. And as a summer unit, they don't get a lot of banners from time to time, but they do typically show up around summer each year, and JP has been doing better about running their SSRs and giving them actual banners. So again, with regards to Kama, I don't think you have to worry about it too much. You will have multiple opportunities to get her, even if you don't acquire her here. Now, the reason she's often debated is because she comes in as sort of this interesting little version of almost a power creep on Space Ishtar. And so a lot of people have a tendency to debate that back and forth. And when I say power creep, that's already going to get some people up in arms. Please understand that both of these units in what they do are absolutely adequate. They are fantastic units, and you really don't need to compare them too much. If you prefer Space Ishtar, you are still perfectly fine with Space Ishtar. If you prefer Kama and, again, sort of Sakura in that comparison, then yes, you can absolutely go with Kama, and you probably won't regret it if you manage to get by all the way up until this point without Space Ishtar. So again, they're relatively comparable units, and there really doesn't serve to be any point to comparing them too much other than for, again, grudge matches, basically. So we will talk about the comparison a little bit, but just to more or less assure you that it's actually pretty balanced and you don't really have to care too much. So talking about her actual performance here, she is an AoE arts-based Avenger. And we've seen over the years where our almost AoE variants of some of the extra classes really needed to be good, powerful loopers in order to see a lot of use. It's only been more recently here on JP that we started to see them actually work in some of the extra classes a little bit more profusely, such that you actually do have times to utilize an AoE unit of one of the extra class capabilities, rather than taking them as some sort of neutral looper. That has for a long time been their primary use, and that is also why for a long time there you saw a lot of use out of, say, Edmund Dantes as well as Space Ishtar, but some of our other AoE Avengers just didn't really hold up and were kind of left by the wayside. And that's just because they weren't really proficient loopers, and there wasn't a lot of need to actually use an AoE Avenger. So basically you were relegated into the haves and the have-nots. Basically the haves were the ones that could actually neutral loop well and basically be taken into any scenario, versus the ones that didn't have it weren't necessarily able to actually be utilized effectively in a lot of scenarios. So again, totally up to you to decide how you wish to use Kama. Kama can be a just fundamentally good looper for you, and that's going to be the big attraction for her outside of obviously who she is. So talking about her attack power here, let's start off with the stats. She has 13.2k attack. This is fantastic. This is a insanely high attack power. Again, one of the top ones in the game. Definitely a nice thing for her to have. The HP value, though, is the trade-off here, and that is a little bit anemic, and that's something you're going to have to be careful with, but this is usually par for the course with our Avengers. They have a tendency to be very offensively focused compared to something like Rulers, which are a little bit more defensively focused. Now, she is Sky Attribute. She does have a pretty pitiful star absorption, but we're used to that on our Avengers. Same thing with star generation right here. She is arts as well, so don't expect too much out of either of those categories. She does have a 0.52 NP gain rate, which is coming in pretty much right on average. I'm a-okay with this, and you will see that her NP gain is actually really not that big of an issue. Her NP charge defense here is the 5% that you see with a lot of Avengers. This is really nice for her to have. It's basically the top in the game. And it just means that every hit of every attack that hits her will generate 5% NP gauge. Really, really nice. Her death rate here, though, is actually fantastically low. She's going to be very difficult to death proc, and this will actually make her a decent option going up against something that is going to trigger a lot of death procs. Her alignment here is neutral evil, so again, kind of pretty common ones. Neutral's not super common, at least, so most things have a tendency to affect one end of the spectrum with regards to alignment, so being neutral's a-okay. But the evil one there certainly can be targeted by enemies, so just keep that in mind. But there are also now people that manage to buff these, so it's also something you might be able to use to your advantage. She is female, she is demonic, divinity, hominide, humanoid, immune to pigify, pseudo-servant, riding, servant, summer mode servant, weak to intimate elish, and in stage 1 she is a child servant, and in stage 2 to 3 she is levitating. Now, normally I don't spend too long talking about the traits here, but I will, at least with regards to Kama here, stop to talk about this, because this is something that I've seen debated numerous times in our community right here, is the fact that I've seen people actually say that it's meta to keep Kama in the first ascension. This is not true, and the logic here goes that they might be able to buff the unit more because it's a child. However, most of these child-centric buffs are, something on the realm of a nice charisma buff. There are numerous other people that can provide these sorts of buffs, including people that can provide them to females. So no, it's not meta to keep Kama in the child servant form. Don't let anyone try to lie to you. There's not really any actual advantage to it, because again, there are numerous ways that you can buff a unit depending on their traits or their gender. So don't worry about that too much. And again, levitating is a nice thing, but it's only been utilized at least once so far in the game, so don't worry about that one either. Use whatever ascension you want to. With regards to her deck, she does have double arts, double quick. Just a single buster card there, and again, her hit counts are all average with the exception of the quick card, which is 4 hit. It's actually kind of nice for her on that quick card because, again, above average hit count there, plus the riding trait, so you can actually assume that her quick cards will do fairly solid for an Avenger. It's still not going to be, absolutely fantastic, crazy stars generated, but yes, you could get some decent NP gen and star gen out of this. I think certainly a lot of us would actually hope for instead a third arts card here in place of the second quick card, and that is going to be something that I'm going to say could have been better about her, but at the end of the day, it's not too big of a deal. They still gave you the double arts cards at least that still will allow you to form quite a few arts chains, and this could be, again, combined with her Arts Noble Phantasm to form a triple arts Brave chain, something that could really help out both in PGen and damage. So still not a bad deck, but yes, I would say that I think I would personally prefer the third arts card there. Now, with regards to her active skills, her first one here is an increase to her own arts performance for 3 turns of 30%. Definitely a nice solid 3-turn steroid. She does get self-evasion for 2 attacks, 3 turns. This is going to be at least part of her survival kit here. And again, as we talked about her HP, keep in mind it's rather anemic for a 5-star, so this is going to be something you might want to pay attention to depending on how things are flowing in the fight. If you're utilizing her just as a farmer, you're not going to care. You're going to pop the skill turn 1 and you're going to go burr. But if you're utilizing this in a little bit more of a challenge scenario, you might want to watch down the stretch when, say, your Castoria's protections wear off, when you're going to utilize this in order to sort of minimize damage output against you. Because again, in more duration-oriented fights, it's more about killing and killing as fast as you can, but staying alive in order to do that. So you may find that you have to use this skill selectively later on, but still not too bad and no different than a lot of other units that have things like this. Her second skill here is an increase to her own NP damage for 3 turns by 20%. That's just a small, solid addition. It is 3 turns. This can, again, get boosted by Oberon, so he can double this up and, again, get that benefit. This is not going to be, as good as, say, Space Ishtar stacking overcharge that gives NP damage, but again, this would be roughly comparable at least to her NP damage up that she has off of her skill. So again, another nice thing here. And interestingly enough, she also gets the chance to charm all enemies for 1 turn by 100%. You're really going to want to lure this skill purely because you're going to want that 100% chance to charm. You don't want the failure to occur on your end if you can help that. Because again, you could be going up against an enemy that might just have naturally high resistance and resist this effect. So certainly on wave 3 especially, where you could see servants and stuff like that that will have magic resistance, you're going to want to make sure that you have taken every step that you can to maximize the capability for this to land on the enemy. And the reason why is because Kama's damage scales off of charm. So you're going to want to land as much charm as you can. That's also going to mean that she's going to pair very well with other units that can instill charm on the enemy. Even her own original assassin form there. You might use a sort of assassin Kama to take out a single target wave, while sort of Summer Kama loops over waves 1 and 3 or something like that. So you could utilize that to your effectiveness, but again, how are you going to get the charm on if you don't actually hit it with the NP? So that's going to be somewhat of a concern there. And that's where I'm going to say it is going to rely on your ingenuity and taking the right people to the node in order to help her out if you want to get the most out of that down the stretch. Again, this skill is on a 7-turn cooldown, so it is rather long. Definitely feels like they were trying to limit just how often you could do this so that you couldn't get yourself into a scenario where, you know, kind of like in the Buster systems, you get cooldown reduction and you're popping it like every turn. They wanted to make sure that it was long enough to sort of prevent that so that she couldn't just always have it. Now, with regards to the third skill here, you can see it charges her own NP gauge. It is a 50% charge, so yet again, another skill you will want to lure. My recommendation for Kama is going to be a 10-10-10 on her skills. You could maybe get away with a 9 on the first skill, but I don't recommend it. So again, it's just going to be one of those deals where if you really like her, go all in. Again, her charge here, though, as we were saying, is 50%. That's definitely a nice amount to have. Definitely functions really well with a lot of other 50% charges, but that's assuming she doesn't refund anything. And she does. Refund will come into play quite a bit for Kama. You can see that it's going to grant an on-attack activate debuff for 3 turns. So basically, whenever she attacks, it will debuff the enemy over the next 3 turns right here. And that is that it will give the Heartfelt Blaze debuff for 3 turns to an enemy when normal attacking. This increases own damage against enemies with the Heartfelt Blaze debuff by 10 times in for 3 turns. That is 10 times the number of stacks in effect. So it's going to increase your damage for 3 turns to enemies like that. This is going to be a power mod as a result because it is not specific to the NP. Again, you can also see here too that this is a maximum stat count here of 10. That is going to be kind of something that you won't naturally hit. You could hit it, but it would basically require either solo or card lock memes in order to pull it off. So just understand that there is a potential theoretical maximum here of 10. And remember, the reason why it would need to be 10, because you're sitting there probably thinking, well, I could only get, 3 turns worth, and that would be, 9 attacks, right? It also includes extra attacks. Extra attacks can also proc this, so yes, you could utilize this to get even more stacks. And this is where, again, talking about this, it may be to your benefit to pre-card a Kama NP rather than post-card it. So instead of carding after the NP, you might want to card before the NP just to get more stacks of Heartfelt Blaze, as your NP will scale off of it. So definitely going to be a nice thing for you to do. This skill is also on a 6-turn cooldown. She does have magic resistance herself here for 20% debuff resist, Riding A for 10% additional quick performance for those 4-hit quick cards, Avenger B to increase her NP gen rate when taking an attack by 18%, and again a demerit of 8% debuff resist down on the party. And then Oblivion Correction here for critical damage of 8%, Self-Replenishment Magic, a rather strong variant here at A with 3.8%. Again, this could potentially round up for you, but it would depend on you getting into a situation where rounding would matter. And then Independent Manifestation E here for critical damage of 2%, instant kill resistance of 2% on top of her already crazy amount. And then increase own mental debuff resistance by 2% right there. She does get Demon King's Essence for basically a just unique form of divinity that makes her have 225 flat damage added to her attacks. This is nothing too big to write home about. It's just free damage. So definitely a nice thing, but not too big. What is big is she can become charm immune. This is rather nice since, again, you might find yourself in a scenario where you're going up against an enemy that puts a lot of charm on you. Take Kama in and you won't have to worry about her getting charm locked. And then furthermore, her damage scales off of charm being on the enemy, so if you can find a way to reverse that, you might see yourself being able to deal quite a bit of damage. With regards to her append skills here, the mana loading is absolutely fantastic and going to be what I recommend you go with first. This is usually the case with our arts loopers anyways, but again, this just could help you out in some sort of hybrid scenario where you've got multiple damage dealers in the party that you're trying to charge up concurrently, or it might just be a case of making it easier for you to start from 0. And yes, Kama can start from 0 here. Her third append here is Anti-Lancer attack damage aptitude. This is probably not worth it unless you are going to go hard in the paint and use her as a full-blown neutral looper. If she's going to be sort of your Space Ishtar replacement for that sort of thing, then yes, getting the Anti-Lancer attack damage aptitude is not a bad thing. She would be neutral against them. This would just mean that taking her against Lancers, you would deal even more damage. So not a bad thing, all things considered, but she doesn't have anything that particularly speaks to this third append particularly. So again, no reason to actually get it other than that neutral looping consideration. And then the extra attack finesse improvement. This will enhance not only the damage of the extra attack, but also the stars and NP generated by that. So certainly could be useful to you, especially if you are taking her in solo environments, or you're managing to again try to card lock with her or something like that in order to get the most amount of stacks as you can out of Heartfelt Blaze. Regardless of whether or not you're doing those things, you probably still want to target Kama Brave Chains purely to get the extra attack. So yes, getting the first append here would not be the worst thing in the world either. So again, I would go with mana loading first, and then depending on your priorities, the third skill and the first skill. With regards to her Noble Phantasm, it is a 4-hit AoE Arts NP. Again, this will deal damage to all enemies, and then after the fact, reduce their defense by 20% for 3 turns. So, again, another comparison here to Space Ishtar. Space Ishtar doesn't do any defense down, but she does get stacking NP damage up for 3 turns that she carries with her between waves. This also can be doubled up and boosted by Oberon, which is really strong. Summer Kama doesn't get as good of a hand dealt here in the fact that hers is defense down for 3 turns. So unless you're going up against the same enemy, this isn't going to stack. And it's not going to get carried between the waves with you, nor can it be doubled up and boosted by something like Oberon. So certainly not bad to have. It's free damage if you manage to NP against something again, or card after the NP, but not going to be as useful necessarily as just getting NP damage up. Her overcharge effect here deals extra damage to enemies with the charm debuff. So again, super effective damage here. This means that Kama has both a power mod off of that Heartfelt Blaze and a super effective modifier here. And again, this does mean that you're going to try to want to get that charm debuff on critical enemies so that you can deal a lot more damage to them. Super effective is always multiplicative scaling with any other source of steroid or power up that you can get. So it's a really, really nice one because it always will scale very well. Again, though, it's just going to come down to, can you find other ways to get more chances at charm, because she only has the one time in her kit. Now, with regards to that, just really quick here, I'd be remiss then if I didn't mention this command code. This is actually from the Oku event where her original form comes from. This command code is a very good one to use on her. It gains 2 critical stars when attacking with the engraved card and increases damage against enemies with the charm status by 20%. This isn't going to affect her NP, but if you do manage to charm the enemy, this could affect the card that you put it on. So certainly in combination with something like Heartfelt Blaze, yes, you could get quite a bit of card damage out of this since there's a lot of synergy here. Normally I don't mention the command codes to you guys because it's a lot about just using the most powerful command code on each unit, and so it's very difficult to recommend anything other than the meta command codes. But in this case, this one actually does have a lot of synergy with her and could be a really useful one for you. As for where it is in the actual Oku event, it is actually up here on level 4, so floor 4 of the event, and all the way down in the 6th section, as they call it on fandom here, the bottom, basically southeast section, the Hallway of Scribbles. You can actually get it there, and just to, again, kind of show you basically right here on the map where it is, you can see that is going to be all the way down here to the southeast, and then basically right in here in this southern path off the 6th room right there. So again, just a little bit of a TLDR as to where you can find that one so that you guys can actually utilize it effectively. And again, you will get another crack at that as you are going to get a main interlude next year for Oku. But with regards to that, let's talk Kama's damage now. Now, again, this is the NP damage sheet. Remember, this isn't gospel. This is just neutral damage numbers. They can obviously change and fluctuate wildly because this does not include any sort of craft essence calculation, any sort of mystic code calculation, or any sort of external buffs from supports. This is just the unit under their own power, utilizing their own effects with their skills maxed and their level maxed. So again, taking a look at this, all things equal here, you can actually see that Summer Kama appears at the top of the AoE Avenger list, and that might make her seem very strong to people. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to go with that, and this is where I said she's kind of a power creep to Space Ishtar. The proponents of Space Ishtar will tell you, what makes Space Ishtar so strong is that she could just kind of keep doing this across different card types. So you don't have to worry too much about this because what they've kind of done since Space Ishtar came out, they've kind of come back through and said, hey, you know what? We're going to make certain units stronger at their original card type. And it might not seem like it from here, but yeah, trust me, Nobu bridges that Buster gap. Same thing with Summer Kama kind of bridging that arts gap right there. And Dantes is kind of probably supposed to be the quick one. He definitely has his edge there a little bit in damage, but as to whether or not that's a thing when you start including Oberon, that's a different story. So again, this is where, like I said, all of this can fluctuate wildly, so don't treat it as gospel. Needless to say, this is a good indication that Summer Kama's damage is quite good. So that's something you're not going to have to worry about with regards to her. Again, you can see if you can actually manage to stack the Heartfelt Blaze debuff on the enemy twice. That's going to be involving pre-carding an NP that you can actually manage to get, again, some really nice damage output here. That's 44k neutral damage. So again, this is probably what you would expect most of the time when using an Avenger. So certainly a really nice thing. But with regards to someone like Space Ishtar, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention that this does not include her base damage value here, does not include her 80% proc for each card type. So if you have a way of securing that, that certainly can help her damage numbers, but I understand the logic here as to why not to include it, because we do the same thing on the lotto sheets a lot of the time. We actually assume Space Ishtar fails the proc for kind of wiggle room on that, especially because that would mean that 1/5 of the time, 1 in every 5 runs, you might fail, and if that somehow screws you on NP generation and you don't have enough to loop back to full, that's not a good thing, right? So it's why they kind of separate this out, and I do think it's okay to do that. But just keep in mind that these numbers will not always be indicative because of that. So certainly you can end up seeing some better stuff here, just depending on what's going on. But again, I am going to say that Space Ishtar, I think when you start including Oberon, has a lot of benefit, but Summer Kama is still going to be really usable, still going to be really powerful, especially in an arts-centric scenario. Now, let's talk Refund in relation to that. If we were to compare pretty much every other arts Avenger here, you can actually see you have Salieri, or as I like to call him, Salad Larry. Salieri at basically 3 overkill hits, so that would be 1 overkill hit per enemy in a 3 enemy wave. The reason you can assume 1 overkill hit is because if you kill the enemy, that gets you 1 overkill hit. So assuming you kill the wave, 1 overkill hit each, which is basically the minimum for having killed, Salieri against neutral targets is going to refund about 84%. He's actually really solid in that regard. One of his big concerns is overall damage output, and again, the fact that his arts buff is limited to a number of times, which I think is stupid, but regardless, Salieri can certainly be pretty solid. Essentially, Ranmaru here, who is going to be your welfare later in the year from Gouda 6. And again, she can actually get, 32k, almost 33k in damage output right here, since you're going to be guaranteed in P5 of her. You're looking at a little bit less refund there for the 3 hits. That's going to be somewhere around the 71%. And these are against neutral enemies as well. So not just neutral damage, but like someone that is 1.0 in P generation. So it could be higher, could be lower, depending on who you're up against. But again, your average there is pretty much going to be 71%. So not too bad. But again, consider charging in each of these scenarios. Units like Salieri and Ranmaru not going to have necessarily a whole lot of charge to their benefit. Meanwhile, a unit like Nito Alter, who's actually a lot more recent addition here, and definitely functions a little bit more off of death proc, but it is instant kill after damage because they learned that lesson finally. Her refund numbers against 3 against neutral are going to be somewhere around the 63.4% number there. So you're looking definitely a little bit more spicy, but Nito has 100% charge in her kit, so it's not that big of a deal in most scenarios. Definitely a nice thing that she even has that much, as her caster form certainly can struggle with refund in a lot of cases. And then we get to Space Ishtar. And Space Ishtar has a whole bunch of scenarios that she can run into, again, whether or not the arts succeeds or fails. So with 3 hits of overkill, with the arts succeeding, including the Avenger passive on all of these, right? You're looking at 80% NP generation. So really good, actually, on the NP generation side of things. This is what allows Space Ishtar to be really nice. But in comparison, if that fails, if you don't get that 80% chance up of an arts proc, you're looking instead at about 73%. So not nearly as, samey here. It could cost you in the long run. Because remember, this is including that Avenger sort of passive, like 3.5%, I think it is on Space Ishtar that she can get. So again, definitely could be a concern depending on your actual refund amount and whether or not it's going to get you to some sort of nice break-even amount. You might see you falling short. And remember, you can't always get more overkill hits than this. It doesn't necessarily have to be 1-to-1. But then when we get to Summer Kama here, it actually gets a little bit interesting. Against neutral, you're looking at 81.3%. So even better. And certainly not going to be a full refund right there with just the 1 hit of overkill. But yes, you could potentially get a lot out of this. So could you start from 0 with this amount? Yes. Again, just to put this in plain and simple terms right here, if you manage to have her mana loading, if you utilize even like 80% from a Castoria right there, you've got your first NP ready to fire off, and you still got 20% from one of the Castorias that is an NP gain. So let's assume you don't have that full amount of NP gain. Let's assume instead that this was something like going up against like Berserkers. Well, that would be somewhere around more like 60% refund right there. Well, that's not going to be too hard. She has a 50% charge skill, so you can just go ahead and pop that right there. That's enough for wave 2. And then certainly, as long as she gets even 30% right here, and Oberon's going to finish that one off. So you could end up trying to utilize something like Fragment of 2004 here to make it work, and still be able to start from 0 so that you didn't have to use plug. But yeah, it's just going to come down to charge increments and getting the right amounts. You could also instead start out with like, Kama's 50% charge on turn 1. That's totally up to you as to when and where and how to use it. That's your prerogative. But again, there is plenty of charge there, almost overkill amounts in order to be able to start from 0. So yes, you're going to be perfectly fine with Summer Kama and again, obviously Space Ishtar too, starting from 0 with double Castoria. The question would be, how do you handle a weird node where there's maybe not enough enemies? That's where you're going to want to save the charge skill for after that weird wave. So that, like, let's say it's a single enemy wave, you're going to want to still try to loop and get as much damage, or sorry, as much refund out of that as you can, and then pop the charge skill afterwards when you obviously didn't get a lot. So that can definitely be a thing. But again, let's talk now about craft essences. So with regards to craft essences, second I say we can start from 0, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Black Grail. And I've also talked about this numerous other videos, how many other variants of Black Grail you can get. There are numerous other good ones. Black Grail is just the best. You can, again, get something like Angel's Song or Heaven's Feel, or again, even the Berserker variant of it, though it wouldn't work for her in this case. So there are numerous other options besides just Black Grail, and you don't have to have MLB just to get good, solid damage out of it. It is a really strong craft essence for sort of looping and NPing and farming. You will have coming up in the actual summer event Ocean Flyer. This is a really good welfare CE. It's all attack scaling and gives you 50% starting charge, NP damage of 15%, and arts performance of 8%. This would be good if you are up against an odd set wave where, yeah, maybe starting from 0 isn't as feasible because you're facing like, you know, a 2-1-3 node or something like that. In those sorts of scenarios, starting out with more charge is one of the easier remedies to it. So again, having something like this in your arsenal, not a bad thing to have, even if you have a unit that can start from 0. Sign of a Smiling Face is an old New Year's CE. It's also really good. You can see its arts up, NP gen, and NP damage, and it is all attack scaling. Good luck getting your hands on it now if you don't already have it, but it is a decent option. Royal Icing was another one where you can start from 0. This is also an old welfare CE from Oniland. You'll probably get it back one day for those of you guys that don't have it, and it can be a really solid option as its arts up of 15% and NP damage of 25%. So quite a bit there, and again, that could be something that gets boosted by Oberon. Definitely a nice thing. We do end up having more recently here from JP's most recent Valentine's event, Wings of Spring. This is a gotcha CE, and it is Ignore Invincibility, arts up of 5% and NP damage of 20%, so that'd be a good way of getting Invuln Pierce into the deck. You do have from our upcoming Valentine's next year on NA, so basically 2 years ago on JP, you end up having Valentine's Witches. This is another gotcha one, and this one is Ignore Invincibility, NP damage of 25% and NP gen of 10%, so really, really strong. And then obviously, actually right now, on the summer surprise banner that they sprung on you guys, you can roll Honey Lake. I don't quite recommend gotching too hard for it because it is quite the potluck of craft essences, as it's always on rate up and there's a ton of them in there. But if you can manage to even snag one copy of it, it is not a bad CE, and this could give you even more power mod scaling by putting burn command codes on comma in combination with that charm effect. So really, really good, solid damage there, and still the ability to start from 0 and get Ignore Invincibility from it. So again, this is my analysis of Summer Kama. Like I said, she is great. She absolutely will go toe-to-toe with Space Ishtar. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And as for which one's better, the answer is the one that you like more. And honestly, why not both? Totally up to you, though. So again, let me know what you guys think about Summer Kama. Which Ascension is your favorite? It's a spicy one on this one. And again, I will see you guys for the next one. Have a good one.